Okay, now for a quick Devar Torah. We're in the second parsha of Sefer Devarim, or the Book of Deuteronomy, and it starts off with Moshe pleading again with God that he wants to enter the land of Israel. You know, he's been the leader for over 40 years. His one goal in life is to be able to enter Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. That's his one goal. And God tells him, no, Moshe, you're not entering. And the reasons given, the thing with the hitting the rock with the water, but it's also an important lesson. Moshe is being taught an important lesson. Leadership has to transfer. You're a great leader in the wilderness. You're a great leader in getting the Jews from slavery to being able to be free on their own. And remember, it's a learning process. You just don't, wave a magic wand to slaves and they're suddenly free. We see this over and over again, that when you take off the shackles of slavery, what happens is people misbehave. The French Revolution is the classic. That there was no preparation for what would come next. And what came next eventually turned into the Reign of Terror, to Napoleon, and all sorts of big problems. Or the Russian Revolution, which ended up with a worse system than the Tsar. That in order to be free and responsible, you need training. People forget that the Americans, when we had our revolution, we basically were basing it on English common law. If you spoke to George Washington in the 1750s, he would say that he was a subject of the king. Looked at himself as an Englishman. When the English rejected him, he said, wait a minute, I've done everything you want. And you're rejecting me because I'm a colonial? And that set everything in motion. But they never forgot that the rule of law was important. Moshe's big thing was he took this group of slaves and got them to where they would have laws and how to interpret those laws and how to enact those laws to make it into a just and moral society. And he's being taught now, your time is over. You have to make room for Joshua. Joshua's the new leader. You have to make sure that he's trained, ready to take over. And it's no accident that the first paragraph of the Shema is in this week's Parsha for that reason. Because that paragraph, among other things, mentions how you prepare the next generation. You teach them. And it goes into detail. Teach them when they're on their way, when they're standing still, when they're sitting, when they're sleeping, when they're awake. In other words, every moment should be a teaching moment to your children. Interesting to note, somebody did a study about Gush Emunim. Gush Emunim was a religious movement in Israel that set up the settlements, a lot of the what we call settlements in Judea and Samaria. And they noticed something. The children of the political left or the political right, they didn't necessarily follow their parents. The children of the Torah Karta, a lot of them rebelled and stopped being religious. But the children of the Torah Karta not only stayed religious, they went into the movement themselves. So they're curious, how could this be? What's the reason? And the answer is that besides the education that they had, they also saw something else. Their parents were doing what they said. It wasn't, don't do as I say, don't do what I, do what I say, don't do what I do. It was, see how I act? That's how you behave. And because children are sponges, as we all know. They pick up, if you're being false, they'll pick up on it, and they'll say, okay, this, I'm not going to follow this guy because, etc. I'm not going to follow my father because I see my father doesn't believe in what he's teaching. But they see that you're doing the right thing, they will do the right thing. You know, it's a very big, heavy, I know it's very heavy on parents, but that's our job, is to be training the next generation to be what we want them to be. And you do that by you behaving in the right way. Something to think about.